So today we're going to do something crazy, something I don't think anyone has ever done on the internet. We're going to find out who's smarter between the jaded genius Sister Sage or the near godly ruthless prodigy and wielder of the Death Note, Light Yagami. Now this discussion is a very unexpected one, I know, and to be fair, this wasn't the initial video I wanted to make this week. I was supposed to make a video comparing the smarts of Sage to Robot from Invincible. However, this topic came to my brain in a flash while in the shower, and I thought, hey, now that is something I would like to find out. So I decided to make this instead. Buckle up people, cause we are going to unravel the internet's biggest question, even though it literally only became a question like right now. Anyways, these two are very different individuals when it comes to their personality, even though they are both extremely dangerous and downright evil. Sage is not entirely void of human or superhuman empathy, and she occasionally expresses that empathy, as was shown in her interaction with Homelander in episode 1, and when Homelander let her go later on in the show. She doesn't impose her worldviews on others, and most importantly, she tends to avoid direct conflict wherever it is avoidable. Light, on the other hand, from the very beginning has had a holier-than-thou moral compass, and this consistently made him believe that only his worldviews were just, and any other thing were a hindrance to the ideal world. This eventually makes him have an insane god complex where he ends up believing he's literally God, taking super genius pride to a whole new ballpark. Remember that kid in high school who aced every test and thought they could outsmart Einstein himself? Now imagine that kid on a power trip with the god complex. Meet Light Yagami, but dialed up to 100. I know Sage is really confident in her abilities and she will assert that she's the smartest in the room when it calls for it. But Light actively tries to dominate everyone he comes across. He lives off undermining everyone else around him. It is like a drug to him, and it sometimes can lead to very dangerous, dumb decisions, as we'll see in this video. These differences between them influence how they think, plan, and execute. And just as I said in my Butcher vs. Stan Edgar video, the word smart is a very broad term. I mean, it's not something that has like one clear and cut definition per se. Some people may be book smart, some people may be tech savvy. Meanwhile, some people are acutely aware of their environment and situation and are capable of planning effectively to adapt or counteract any inconvenience. Both Light and Sage excel when it comes to this last definition, but which one of them is superior? We're going to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of Sage first, then Light, and then we'd see who'd win, considering these strengths and weaknesses. Now, from the moment we're introduced to Sage, she's portrayed as a paragon of knowledge. Books are littered all over her apartment from the top to the very bottom. When Homelander meets her, she gives him an almost exact description of his health status, in true Sherlock Holmes fashion. And when she presents how she would help him take over the world, he is genuinely impressed. So much so that he's ready to recruit her into the Seven on the spot. To be honest, Homelander isn't the hardest person to impress, and anyone who isn't a complete buffoon, he actually does respect. A clear example would be Stan Edgar and even Butcher. So yeah, Homelander isn't exactly the guy you use to measure your own intelligence. If Sage played that card on someone like Light or L, they'd be mildly intrigued at best. I can imagine Light scuffing and countering her claim with one line. But anyway, Sage's true danger begins to unravel only after she joins the Seven, and that danger lies in her extremely disciplined and tactical mind. Sage cooked up this elaborate plan to destroy Starlight and the Starlight House, and she stuck with it meticulously until she eventually achieved her goal. Now, granted, her plan does have some certain hickeys, especially if you look at it through an objective lens. There are some things she does that you just roll your eyes and you're like, shit like this would never happen in real life. But putting that aside for a second, because frankly it is fiction, and not all of Light's plans exactly make sense either, so putting the objective view aside, Sage managed to destroy Starlight with frankly little effort, all because she managed to stay on script with her own plan, something that Light is not too keen on doing. She also managed to plan contingencies for several of her plans that could have gone wrong. For example, when she was incapacitated in Tech Knight's mansion, she had already fed Victoria with enough pep talk prior to that would enable her stand up when the time was right and speak in her place. Though it's not explicitly stated, I do believe it was a contingency she put in place because she knew A-Train was feeding the boys information, and she knew they'd be there. Now, how does she know specifically that she would be attacked? I don't know, but at that point she probably figured out she was becoming too dangerous, and if there was anyone the boys would want to go after first, it would be her. And the last 2 episodes of the show are when the full extent of Sage's grand plan comes into play. We find out that Sage has been tactically using A-Train as a tool from the very moment she arrived. I talked about this in detail in my Sage video, so if you haven't, you can check that out when you're done with this one. So it turns out Sage knew that A-Train was the mole and in fact was even counting on it. She needed someone on her team who could build some level of trust with the boys, so that when the time was right she would use that to her advantage. And it worked. Sage's plan went exactly how she planned it. A-Train gave the boys misinformation about the assassin and they believed him. And because of that fact, Sage was also able to plant her spy in the boys and get rid of Starlight while at it, which had a pile of dominoes falling down like Robert Singer's imprisonment, Victoria Newman's death, and the capture of the boys. Everything else she lost was in the sacrifice of the ultimate checkmate. It was a truly genius move and it required her to be disciplined enough to not tell Homelander even though he could have very well killed her for it. It also required that she planned and accounted for literally hundreds of variables where things could have gone wrong. Another of Sage's strengths would 100% be her literal superhuman brain. I mean, she found the cure for stage 3 leukemia when she was a kid. That's gotta count for something. Despite how incredibly smart Light is, he would probably never have the ability to assimilate or even consume the amount of information Sage can, and that right there is an unfair advantage. Sage is hands down the smartest person in the boys' universe, and she tries as much as possible to avoid direct confrontation with the enemy, especially when it could mean her plan going awry. And this is a strength she possesses that Light simply does not. However, Light certainly makes up for it in a number of ways. But before we get into that, if you're enjoying this video so far, help the channel grow by giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing. Okay, in the beginning of Death Note, we are introduced to Light as a teenager in high school. And from the moment he picks up that Death Note and seriously examines it with intrigue, we can already tell we are in for some serious shit. Fast forward, and when Light finds out the notebook actually works, he decides he's going to use it to enact a worldwide purge of criminals and essentially become God while he's at it. Just the kind of thought that runs through the minds of most high schoolers. Anyway, Light's #1 strength, apart from the Death Note obviously, is his superhuman intelligence. Light Yagami was probably the smartest kid in the world when he was still alive. He was an exceptional genius, so much so that he even bested the world's greatest detective on numerous occasions. Even Ryuk was impressed occasionally, and he admitted there was no better person he could have given the Death Note to. Light was capable of anticipating his opponent's moves and planning several steps ahead. You thought Sage could plan? Compared to what Light has done in Death Note, Sage's plan was the barest minimum. He showed time and again that he was capable of crafting complex, multi-layered plans that unfolded perfectly, even in chaotic situations. In the first arc, he managed to get the names of 14 FBI agents who were tailing him and kill every last one of them. Later in that arc, when L installs surveillance in his room, Light comes up with the most insane way of getting rid of them with the infamous potato chip scene. He stuffs a small-sized TV with a piece of the Death Note in a potato chip bag and proceeds to write names of criminals, all while simultaneously studying for his exam, which he still aced by the way. That is unbelievable, that is superhuman, and it's no wonder that scene has so much hype around it. He had to place the potato chip bag in the way that the multiple, I'm talking over 60 cameras here, could not sight the TV inside the bag. And he also had to act natural enough to make L and whoever was watching him at the time believe that he was actually studying. That just goes to show you just how brilliant and resourceful Light was, even as a teenager. Even after L straight up meeting Light in person, Light begins to conceive variables and tries to deduce L's plan. He plays along with L's games, even taunting him at times, all while being 100% guilty. The nerve and the confidence he must have had just playing it cool around the world's greatest detective, and even offering to join in the investigation to catch himself is just crazy to me. Another one of Light's wild cards is his ability to manipulate people to essentially act like chess pieces in a big chess game. It's also what I'd like to call his manipulative prowess. If Light had superpowers, this would definitely be #2. This kid is more convincing than politicians, he's more convincing than your local pastor, heck, he's even more convincing than your mom. Light is adept at manipulating people, whether that be through psychological games or just with charm. He can turn people to pawns without them even realizing it, and quickly too. In the first arc, he managed to get an FBI agent to reveal his identity to him. Later, he managed to get that man's wife to do the same thing. Then he kills her as well. Light manipulated Misa Amane to do his bidding throughout the entire show, making her believe he actually loved her, when in fact he did not. Light also convinced his father and family that without a doubt, he wasn't Kira, up until his father's deathbed. His father died without ever finding out he was Kira, and the most insane feat would have to be the fact that he manipulated a Shinigami to essentially kill El and Wataru for him, and as a bonus, she ended up offing herself too. Talk about killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Only this time it's 3 birds. Light took out 3 of his most dangerous enemies in one fell swoop. That, my friends, is the earth-shattering power of psychological manipulation. In the hands of a master, it is a deadly weapon, and Light, definitely a master. As the show progresses, and with less formidable enemies for him to face, he continues his cycle of constant manipulation and lying, and this ends up placing him in a very powerful position in the world, where even government officials all over the world are terrified of him, and he has complete control over the Japanese police department. But while Light's manipulative prowess is next to Satan himself, his cold, callous usage of the Death Note is his true superpower. Light is willing to use the Death Note anyhow he sees fit, and in any way imaginable to achieve his goal. He will literally set timers for people's death. He will wipe his own memory. He will even give out the Death Note, if it means he will achieve his goals. And this cold approach really made him a fierce opponent that you do not want to mess with. He was inhuman in this regard. Yes, Sage is more of a human than Light. Light is an egotistical, callous, maniacal genius with the power of death literally in his hands. So now that we've seen both Sage's and Light's strength, let's talk about their weaknesses and see who would actually win if they were to face off. Starting with Sage. Sage's number 1 weakness against someone like Light would have to be her over-reliance on a meticulous plan. Unlike the characters in The Boys that she was dealing with, who were complete numbskulls, let's be honest, Life is an infinity above them in intelligence, and by nature he is very meticulous as well, and calculative. However, he's also very chaotic and unpredictable, and the Death Note just makes that 10 times worse. If Sage were to go against Light, she would have to be running hundreds of possibilities at any given scenario, and she would be constantly on her toes. There would be no moment of rest because any slip up could literally mean. And the thing is, we're not sure how well Sage does under pressure, seeing as though she was relatively relaxed for most of the show and just coasting along with her plan's framework. Unlike in The Boys, Light could disrupt things very easily, very fast. He literally has the power to bend reality to a degree, so it would be a bizarre hurdle for Sage, just as it was for L. Let's face it, no one with even a modicum of humanity left in them is going to go up against Light and win. I just find that hard to believe. Despite Sage not being the most empathetic kid on the block, she definitely has a human side to her and she's willing to stick to her comrades no matter how insufferable they can get. It's also implied that she cares about her family, like when she talked about her grandma. And that's a problem, cause Light could very well, and he will, use that against her. And I'm not even talking about the 7 now, she could probably have a sister or a close relative she cares about. And if Light manages to get to them, she will be put in a very compromising position. Unlike Light, Sage also has a more grounded moral compass, which could limit her willingness to take certain actions in a battle of ruthlessness against him. Light does not have that problem, but he does have his own weaknesses. And the number 1, which I'm sure many of you would have already guessed by now, is his absurd arrogance. This is by far Light's biggest flaw, and many of the victories L had against Light were as a result of this. From the very first episode of the show, Light exposed his location and that he needed a name and a face to operate, solely because of his arrogance. If Sage were to even have a chance against Light, this is definitely what she would need to exploit. Another major weakness for Light is his god complex, and the fact that he thinks he can never be wrong. While this looks like pretty much the first one, it's not exactly the same thing. Towards the end of the show, Light made some downright laughable choices, like handing a Death Note to a man named Mikami Taro, which was what ultimately caused his apprehension. And he did this because for some reason he believed Mikami would act as optimally as he wants him to. Because why? Because Light perceives himself as a god, and he starts building this cult-like following, which just ends up not doing him much good at the end. Another weakness that Light has is probably the Death Note itself. Crazy, I know, right? But really, it's true. I mean, all of Light's victories against L were centered around the Death Note. every single one of them. So, if you wanted to incapacitate Light and do it very quickly, your surest bet would be to get rid of the Death Note. That's if you can come in contact with it at all though, cause he guards that thing with his life. You have no idea. Now that we've looked at the strengths and weaknesses of both Light and Sage in a hypothetical showdown, who would come out on top? Well, my final verdict is this. Sage is a formidable opponent, and while she has the brainpower and intelligence to hold her own, Light's strategic ruthlessness with the Death Note make him one tough nut to crack. In a drawn-out confrontation, I find it hard to believe that Sage will be alive at the end of it. Light is willing to cross any and all lines to attain victory, and that makes him incredibly difficult to defeat. Add that to the fact that he has mastered the Death Note's usage to near perfection, and he's suddenly 100 times more dangerous. And I could be wrong, I haven't seen much from Sage, and I can't fully judge her based just off one season. She wasn't forced into any situation that would necessarily make her pressured, so I don't know how well she does under extreme tension. But I do know even if Light would win, it would not be a straightforward and easy win against Sage, especially if she nails his weaknesses early and starts exploiting them as quickly as possible. She could definitely force Light into a more complex and harder battle than he would expect. Anyway, who do you think would win in a battle, Sister Sage or Light Yagami? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video and you want to support what I do here, you can buy me a cup of coffee on buymeacoffee.com. The link is in the description. I am truly grateful for every one of you who watched these videos, and the support is unreal. These past few months, it has been a surreal experience. It means a lot. Thanks for watching my videos. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Okay, bye.